I was washing the dinner dishes when my son-in-law's jacket buzzed on the kitchen chair. He'd rushed out 20 minutes earlier, something about forgetting a client file at the office, and left his phone behind without realizing it. I almost didn't look. I'm 63 years old, and I was raised to respect other people's privacy. But the screen lit up bright against the dark fabric, and the name that appeared stopped my hands cold under the running water. The contact name read, Margaret, my wife's name. My Margaret, the woman I buried 14 months ago. I stood there with soap still on my fingers, staring at that name like it might disappear if I blinked. It didn't. The phone buzzed again. Same name, same photo, a woman with dark hair and a smile I didn't recognize, but the name underneath it said Margaret as clearly as anything I'd ever read in my life. I turned off the faucet. I set down the dish I was holding, and I asked myself the question that would keep me awake for the next 3 weeks straight. Why does my son-in-law have a woman named Margaret saved in his phone? My wife passed from heart failure 14 months before that evening. The doctor said it was sudden, which was technically true. She collapsed on a Thursday morning while watering her tomato plants in the backyard, and by Friday evening she was gone. 61 years old. We'd been married 34 years. Our daughter, Claire, was devastated. She's our only child, and she and her mother were extraordinarily close, the kind of close where they talked every single day, sometimes twice. Claire took the loss harder than anyone. Her husband, my son-in-law, whose name is Derek, was a steady presence through the whole ordeal. Helped with the funeral arrangements, handled the paperwork so I didn't have to, flew in relatives from 3 different states. I remember standing at Margaret's graveside, thinking that whatever else might be uncertain in this world, at least my daughter had married a good, capable man. I thought that for 14 months. Then I saw the name on his phone. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because it matters. I didn't feel suspicious immediately. The first thing I felt was something closer to vertigo, a physical dizziness, like the floor had shifted. Margaret is not a common name. It wasn't common even when my wife was born. I'd gone 14 months without hearing anyone say it aloud, and seeing it light up on Derek's phone felt the way I imagine a ghost would feel, like something that had no business being in the room. I picked the phone up. I know some people would say that was wrong, that it wasn't my phone, wasn't my business. But I want those people to understand what it's like to bury your wife of 34 years and then 14 months later see her name glowing on another man's screen at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. There is no handbook for that moment. You pick up the phone. The screen required a passcode, and I didn't have it, but the notification was still visible. A text message preview, no more than a sentence. It read, "Did you find the second folder? We can't let him see it." Him, me. I was almost certain it meant me. I set the phone back down exactly where I'd found it, facing the same direction, same angle. My hands were shaking. Derek came back for the phone about 40 minutes later. He knocked, which was unusual. He has a key. They both do. They've had keys since the wedding. I let him in and watched his eyes go straight to the jacket on the chair. He grabbed the phone without checking it in front of me, which itself felt like something. Like a man confirming that something was still locked away. "Forget anything else?" I asked. "No, this was it," he said, smiled at me. The same easy, reliable smile I'd seen 100 times at Sunday dinners. "You eaten yet, Dad?" He calls me Dad. Has since the wedding. I always liked it. "I'm fine," I said. "Drive safe." When he left, I sat down at the kitchen table and stayed there for a long time in the dark. I didn't say anything to Claire. I want to explain why, because I know that's the first question anyone asks. She'd lost her mother. She was still grieving, still the kind of grieving where certain Thursdays were harder than others, where she kept Margaret's gardening gloves on the windowsill because she wasn't ready to put them away. The last thing I was going to do was walk into her house and say, "I think your husband might be hiding something with a woman named after your dead mother based on a name on a phone screen and a half-visible text message." That's not protecting my daughter. That's detonating a bomb in a room and hoping it lands right. So I did what I've done my whole life when something needed figuring out. I started paying attention. I'm retired now 31 years with the county assessor's office. The last 12 as deputy assessor, and the one thing that work teaches you is how to track paper. Money moves, and when money moves, it leaves a trail. Doesn't matter if you're filing property disputes or investigating fraud. The documents always tell a story if you know how to read them. The first thing I did was pull out the folder Derek had given me after Margaret died. He'd been the one to organize everything, the insurance claims, the probate paperwork, the bank account transitions. I'd been too grief-stricken to do much more than sign where he pointed, and I'm ashamed to admit that now. But I'd kept copies of everything in a filing cabinet in the home office, because 31 years in government means you always keep copies of everything. I spread the documents across the kitchen table on a Saturday morning when I knew Claire and Derek were in Raleigh visiting her college roommate. I read every page, and on the third pass, I found it. Margaret had held a life insurance policy through her employer, a school district. She was an administrative coordinator with a payout of $220,000. The named beneficiary on that policy, as of 5 years before her death, was me. My name, my social security number, clearly typed on the original document. But there was an amendment form, a change of beneficiary request, dated 11 months before Margaret died. The new beneficiary listed was a trust I had no memory of, in a name I didn't recognize, administered by a law firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had never seen this form before. I had never signed it. The signature line, however, had a signature on it. My wife's signature, or something that looked close enough to hers that I'd probably have missed it scanning quickly. But I wasn't scanning quickly anymore. I took a photograph of every page with my phone, put the folder back exactly as I'd found it, and then sat very still for about 10 minutes. Then I called my brother-in-law, Philip, Margaret's younger brother, a man I trust more than almost anyone still living. Philip drove up from Greensboro the following Thursday. I hadn't told him much on the phone, just that something had come up with the estate paperwork and I needed a second set of eyes. He's a retired CPA, so the cover story was plausible enough. When I showed him the amendment form, he was quiet for a long time. "Did Margaret tell you about this trust?" he asked. "No." "Did you know the law firm?" "Never heard of them." I looked them up. They're real, but their specialty is asset protection and private trusts, not typical estate planning. Philip set the paper down flat on the table and looked at me the way people look when they're about to say something they wish they didn't have to. "Who handled the paperwork after she died?" he asked. "The rec." He nodded slowly. Didn't say anything else. "I hired a private attorney the following week. Not a family lawyer, a litigation specialist named Patricia, who came recommended by a former colleague. I didn't tell Claire. I drove to Patricia's office on a Wednesday afternoon and I laid everything out for her. The amendment form, the trust name, the law firm, the text message preview I'd seen on Derek's phone, the name Margaret saved in his contacts. Patricia listened without interrupting, which is the sign of a good attorney. When I finished, she asked me 3 questions. First, had the insurance money already been paid out? Yes, 14 months ago. Second, did I have documentation of what the original beneficiary designation said? Yes, I had the original policy in my folder. Third, had my wife ever mentioned wanting to change her beneficiary for any reason? No, never, not once. "I need 2 weeks, Patricia said. "Don't confront your son-in-law. Don't tell your daughter. Don't move anything. Don't access any accounts. Don't do anything that looks like you're building a case. Just act normal." "How am I supposed to act normal?" I asked. "The same way you've been acting for the last 3 weeks, she said. "You already are." The 2 weeks Patricia asked for turned into 3, and those were the longest 3 weeks of my life. I had Sunday dinners with Claire and Derek, same as always. I asked Derek about work, and he told me about a commercial project his firm was pitching in Durham. I watched him pass the bread basket to my daughter. I watched him refill her water glass without being asked. I watched him be, to all visible appearances, a good husband to my daughter. And I sat across the table from him with a secret sitting in my chest like a stone in deep water. One Sunday, while Claire was in the kitchen and Derek and I were alone on the back porch, he mentioned that he'd been meaning to talk to me about the house. "Margaret's house," he said. "This house. I know you've said you're not ready to think about it, but the market in this county is strong right now. If you ever did want to sell, it would make sense to get ahead of it." "I'm not selling Margaret's house," I said. "No, of course not," he said quickly. "I just mean when you're ready. No rush." I looked at him. He looked back at me, smiled. I smiled back. That night I called Patricia and told her what he'd said. "He's getting impatient," she said. That's useful. It means he'll make a mistake. He made the mistake 9 days later. Patricia had been working through the Charlotte law firm, subpoenaing trust records. What she found was this. The trust had been established 3 years before Margaret's death, not by Margaret, but through a limited power of attorney document that, on examination, bore a notarization stamp from a notary whose license had lapsed 18 months before the document was supposedly signed. The signature on the power of attorney was not Margaret's, not even close, once a forensic document examiner looked at it. The trust had received the full $220,000 insurance payout 14 months ago. From the trust, over the following months, money had been transferred in segments to 2 accounts. One was a business account registered to a property holding company. The other was a personal account belonging to a woman whose legal name I didn't recognize. Patricia ran the name. The woman, I'll call her by her first name, which was Renee, had been Derek's girlfriend before he met Claire. They had dated for 4 years. According to what Patricia's investigator found, they had never entirely stopped. Renee was the contact in Derek's phone saved under the name Margaret. I need to tell you what that felt like, because I think it's important. It didn't feel like anger, not at first. It felt like something much colder than anger. When you're 63 years old and you've spent 34 years building a life with someone, and you find out that the person who stood next to your daughter at the altar, who gave the toast at your wife's memorial, who held Claire while she cried at the graveside, had stolen your wife's insurance policy and funneled it to a woman he never stopped loving. The emotion that arrives first isn't rage. It's a kind of grief that doesn't have a name yet. Then the other thing arrived. The thing I hadn't let myself think about yet. Margaret had not died of simple heart failure. She had been in good health, active, gardening, walking 3 miles a day, no history of cardiac problems. The doctors had attributed her collapse to an undetected arrhythmia, which happens, I know it happens. I read everything I could find in the weeks after she died. But there had been no autopsy. Derek had gently discouraged it. She wouldn't have wanted that, he'd said. She'd want a rest, I'd agreed. I was in no state to argue with anything. I went to Patricia with this. I told her that I needed to know if there was more. She went quiet for a moment, and then she said she'd already been thinking the same thing. The medical examiner's office agreed to a review given the new evidence about the fraudulent trust. That review took 6 weeks, and they were the most disorienting 6 weeks of my life. I carried 2 realities around simultaneously, the visible one, in which I had Sunday dinners with my daughter and her husband and helped Derek hang a new ceiling fan in their guest room, and the invisible one, in which I was potentially building a case for the murder of my wife. The toxicology review found elevated levels of a cardiac glycoside compound consistent with sustained low-dose exposure, the kind of compound found in certain plants that have no business being in anyone's food or drink unless someone put them there deliberately. The kind of compound that, administered slowly over weeks or months, would cause exactly the kind of cardiac event that Margaret experienced on that Thursday morning in the garden. Patricia called me when the preliminary findings came back. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a hardware store. I don't remember what I'd gone there to buy. They're opening a homicide investigation, she said. I sat in that truck for 45 minutes before I felt like I could drive. The detectives moved faster than I expected once the investigation opened. They'd been thorough and quiet about it. I'll give them full credit for that. They traced the financial records, confirmed the fraudulent power of attorney, established communication records between Derek and Renee going back years, and found purchase records for a botanical supplement digitalis extract derived from foxglove in a transaction tied to Renee's address, made 14 months before Margaret died. They arrested Derek on a Tuesday morning at his office. They arrested Renee the same day at her apartment in Charlotte. I know this because the lead detective, a woman named Carol who'd kept me informed throughout, called me before the arrests went through. She wanted me to be prepared, and she wanted to make sure I didn't tip anything off. I didn't tip anything off. I hadn't tipped anything off for 4 months. The hardest part, the part I think about the most, even now, was Claire. I drove to her house before the detectives got there. I wanted her to hear it from me first. I sat across from her at her own kitchen table, and I held her hands, and I told her what I had found and what the investigators had concluded. I watched my daughter hear that her husband had been slowly poisoning her mother to collect on a life insurance policy that he'd fraudulently redirected to himself and a woman he'd been seeing behind her back for years. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, she kept getting headaches. That whole last year, she kept saying she had headaches and the doctor told her it was stress. I held my daughter's hands and I didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything to say. Derek was charged with first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and forgery. Renee was charged as a co-conspirator in the fraud and the homicide. Both cases went to trial. Derek was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Renee was convicted on the conspiracy charges and sentenced to 22 years. The insurance company, once presented with the court's findings, worked with Patricia to pursue civil recovery. The process took time, but what remained of the fraudulently transferred funds was traced and returned. I set it aside in an account for Claire. I told her it was her mother's, because it was. Margaret's house, my house, still has her gardening gloves on the windowsill. I'm not ready to move them yet. Some days I stand in the backyard where she planted her tomatoes, and I think about how long I walked around not knowing, and I feel a particular kind of sorrow that I suspect will never entirely go away. But I also think about what I would have missed if I hadn't picked up that phone on that Tuesday night, if I'd respected another man's privacy and set it back down and gone back to my dishes. There's a thing I've come to believe in the years since all of this unfolded, and it's this: the people who love us leave traces. Margaret never got to tell me what was happening to her, but something, some current running under the ordinary surface of things, made her name appear on a screen at exactly the right moment. I know there's a plain explanation for that. A woman using a dead woman's name to hide in plain sight. Nothing supernatural about it. But I've been in that garden enough times since, in the early morning when the light comes in low over the fence, to think that maybe the plain explanation isn't the only true one. I still water the tomatoes. I can't seem to stop. If there's one thing I want anyone watching this to take with you, it's not about revenge, even though that's what this channel is called. Revenge implies you went looking for a fight. I didn't go looking for anything. I was washing dishes. What I'd call it, instead, is attention. Paying attention when something feels wrong, even when it would be easier to look away. Keeping the paperwork. Trusting the part of yourself that goes still when it sees something it doesn't understand. Margaret deserved that, and I'm glad, for whatever peace it offers to her, to Claire, to anyone who knew her, that she got it. If you're watching this and something in your own life feels off, don't wait. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. Paper and money and time leave trails, and the people who think they've covered theirs completely are almost always wrong about something. They almost always leave one thing behind. For Derek, it was a name on a phone screen. That was enough.